Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Burch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Burch, and today I'm joined with a special co-host. What's up, Alex?
Hey, Emmy. Hi, everybody. I am a proud listener of this podcast on my morning runs, and I'm so happy to be here today. My name is Alex Gartner, and I'm the Artistic and Executive Director of the Pensacola Children's Chorus.
Alex and I are writing a book. If you haven't caught episode 74, you should totally go check it out, where we introduced our book.
Yes, we are writing a book. It's called Behind the Choir, an Executive Guide. Well, the working title is Behind the Choir, an Executive Guide to Magnifying Your Organization's Value and Potential. And we're really excited to be a part of this podcast on our sort of like a pre-book tour.
Pre-release tour. That's what we're going to do, pre-release. A whole series. So the way the book is set up, there's 3 sections. In each section, there is a special guest that we interview, and we pull things from that interview to tie the whole section together and to give you tangible real-life experience that you can walk away with. This is the interview with section 2. We talked to Coty Raven Morris. She's the bomb, and she helped us figure out ways that we can empower and find our community. She answered everything from how do we get started identifying who should be in our community or how to impact our communities through the power of practice and really clearly, intentionally identifying the why behind things. What was your favorite takeaway from this one, Alex?
You know, for me, Dr. Morris is just so impassionate about what she believes and the kind of culture that she creates. And so we would ask a question and we would sort of divert from that question into this much bigger conversation. But then she was always able to tie it right back to the heart of that question. I think it really speaks to sort of the importance of intentionality behind the cultures that we build within our organizations.
I'm so glad that this was a co-hosted episode. It's a lot of fun to have a co-host. So thanks for being on the show, Alex. And without further ado, we present to you Coty Raven Morris and How to Find and Empower Your People, Section 2 in our book. Today on the Music Ed Matters podcast, as part of Alex Gartner and myself's pre-book release series, we welcome Section 2 guest, Coty Raven Morris. Hello, Coty.
Hello. It's so good to be here.
We are so glad you're here. Coty is interviewing and giving us content for the opening section. Each of our 3 sections of the book have experts in the area that help us kind of wrap the reader's head around where we're going with those chapters ahead. And this chapter is all about finding and empowering your people, this whole section. So before we dive into the questions, Coty, tell the listener, they've heard you before on the podcast, but give us the teaser. Who is Coty Raven Morris?
Well, again, born on a beautiful, cool day in January of 2000. I don't even know what year I was born because that's what 2021 is. I don't recall. What is time? Okay. That's the world's way of saying get to the point. So Coty Raven Morris is a proud music educator stemming from New Orleans, Louisiana. By Houston, Texas, just moved from Houston, Texas to Portland, Oregon, where I am now the professor of choir music education and social justice. One of the new ways I like to introduce myself is my mission is Portland State University. And my purpose is Being Human Together. Being Human Together is a budding nonprofit that I have focusing on difficult conversations in music education and in our communities in general surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion, systemic oppression, and other topics historically considered perhaps controversial or problematic that really do need to occur in our classrooms in order for our young people and people of all ages to be prepared to engage with other people out in the world. So I'm excited to be continuing that mission here in Portland, Oregon, and getting to know another part of the country and meeting new educators.
I love it. We're so excited to see all you're doing. Thank you for agreeing to do this as we talk about ways to find and, as you just said, empower your people. So you've told us a little bit about being human together. Can you talk a little bit more for educators in the room? What are some of these conversations that we're having? How do you need to address this before you go find and empower your people?
Well, in the summer of 2020, as the world experienced the murder of George Floyd and the conversation about social justice and first of all, what is it? And what does it mean to have empathy when listening to other people's stories? What does it mean to perhaps fill in the gaps of things that we have maybe learned about history in practice, in the tunes that we know, the songs we sing, and the traditions that we have, and history in scholarship, and how that has impacted the way that we communicate. One of the things that I realized was missing was the ability to talk effectively and with intention. And people have approached me before. I'm very passionate about social emotional learning. And as a younger teacher, I would have people approach me and say, oh, well, no, only Coty can do that. Coty can do all these things. How do you do it? How do you do it? And as a young teacher, I was really excited. Like, oh, look at all these people asking me all these questions and all these things I can do. I'm so fancy. And then after a while, I was like, I think there is a narrative. It's not the only narrative, but I believe there was a narrative there humming that was not just, oh, look at Coty and what she can do. It's, well, only Coty can do that. And for me to be an educator that believes that I too have so much to learn, I have so much to learn about our field and exponential other items, then that has to mean if I do the math and show my work, it also means that the things that I'm doing in the classroom can be duplicated, replicated, or reinvented by another teacher in their spaces. Now, the question is, are they willing to do it? And I think a lot of us find ourselves, you go to Kodai training this or this, you get the degrees, you get the baton, and we're done, but we're not done. And we actually have that same habit in how we go about our conversations and how generations evolve. We climb hurdles, young people come along as they do, lives keep happening, and we have a fixed mindset based on our experiences that does not make room for the stories of other people. So Coty, how do we talk about social emotional learning? Then turn into Coty, how do we talk about race? How do we talk about feminism? How do I stop the bullying in my classroom? How do I, address this conflict that happened? Well, you can't talk about any of those things until you just practice talking. Everybody's really excited about selling content. Everybody's really excited about all the cool things and all the graphics on Canva. And you know what? I bought into it too. I spent a lot of time making things that, pop and grab the eyes of students and educators and everyone in between. At the end of the day, though, is that resource or the thing that you're engaging in, is it helping you practice communicating with people? And even today, I had an interaction with a student who is not a native speaker, where in first reaction, I thought, well, that was kind of rude. Why do they assume that I would just be available at all times? But then I had to revisit my own biases that I've had before and realize that this student, based on their background and their experiences, the way that they address that particular statement is exactly how they would have done that with their family, exactly how they would have done it in their country of origin. And it was me that had interpreted it as rude. They were actually coming to me for assistance and got straight to the point. My Southern charm says that we need to say some other words in between before we get to the point. It's practice. I don't have practice communicating with that student. And it also revealed that I had not taught the students how to contact me in an effective way. That was the problem. She had tried to reach out to me via cell phone. That's not the way that I want to communicate, but I didn't teach it. I can't be mad at the thing that I did not teach. And it's not just about teaching notes and rhythms. It's not just about teaching the German when you're performing Mahler 2. It's also about teaching, this is how I prefer to be greeted. The amount of awkward interactions I'm having in the hallway now that a lot of people are having, because it's our gut instinct to return to handshakes. But so many of us are not comfortable with handshakes. I don't know if you heard about it. There's this little thing called a pandemic outside. Things are they've been spicy. Things have been spicy for the past year and a half or so, right? And coming out of that, we have not practiced how we verbally and or physically greet each other. If we got to practice handshakes and elbows and toe taps, we probably have to practice some other things too.
I love how you're talking about the element of practice while also identifying, what did I do? What did I not communicate clearly? You take ownership and figure out how to then empower your students. Mm-hmm. So can we talk about how you were just talking about the culture of one of your students, but can you talk about this culture of conversation that you've brought to the table, and how does that intersect with choir, with your world? How does culture and choir intersect?
Yes. There is a director in the DFW area named Thomas Wren who is now working on his PhD, I want to say at University of North Texas. And he taught me when I was younger, Coty, if the choir doesn't get sweepstakes, it's your fault. If the choir doesn't get superior ratings, it's your fault. Point and blank. And the first time I heard that, I took it to heart with pain. Like, oh no, they have not been successful at what I believed was success, right? They have not been successful and I'm going to crumble and fall. Instead, what Thomas was teaching me was that I am to take responsibility. That if the ensemble messes up, perhaps it was something in me that I can adjust it. I was speaking with another educator just the other day in saying someone in the room has to be their cheerleader. Like I have to be my own cheerleader. I have to believe in myself, right? And if I believe in myself, it's not just believing in my success, but it's believing that I have the ability to correct, that we all have the ability to course correct. And that is an element of practice. And you know, we love metaphors. Practice makes perfect. No. Perfect practice makes perfect. Well, what is a perfect practice?
Mm-hmm.
Like that doesn't, right? What we're actually trying to say is that we need to practice with intention. We have a plan. We want to accomplish this, and we don't intend on moving on until we accomplish it. But what if the obstacle in the room is something we can't see? What if it's an intrinsic blockade? Mm-hmm. Do I stay with that? Does perfect practice means that I ignore what my body is telling me, what the energy of the ensemble tells me? So that responsibility, to circle back, that responsibility of it falls on me also invites me to be creative. It invites me to go, well, how many tricks do I actually have in my Barney bag versus what some of us think is choral excellence? When we say things like, well, I'm the director and this is just what it is. And why don't you get it? What is that? That doesn't make any sense.
You're cracking me up because some of the exact points that you made, we already have on paper in one of our chapters that you have not read. So it's just the links are just fantastic. You've talked about, the qualities of, our role as a choir director and the importance of taking a look within ourselves before we look outside for whatever we're casting blame, whatever we're finding a problem with, we have to look first within. What other qualities, do you think that effective leaders need to have?
I think qualities of an effective leader: flexibility. The flexibility, for example, in that responsibility of knowing that sometimes your plan is actually not the right plan. That the flexibility that I got in teaching during the pandemic taught me that the students in front of me truly are enough. And then I think about years of teaching, in public school or even when whether it be high school or the elementary kids I taught when I was, in grad school in Michigan. And you look around the room and we check attendance, and then there's a part of our brain that immediately goes, what can I accomplish today? Because people are missing. The people in front of us are not enough. Now, I do understand and advocate for reaching out to members of our ensembles and of our programs who are not there and saying, you were missed. We wanted you to be there. When you miss rehearsal, this is what happens. At the same time, flexibility in my lesson planning and in my choice of repertoire has taught me, well, what can I do with the voices who are in the room? Because we're talking about something beyond just the end game of a performance. In the journey, I don't ever want my students to catch their breath and tense up because somebody was absent. So we have flexibility. We have this self-reflection. I think leadership in an ensemble also comes with knowing that you are not the only captain in the room. A quote that I've been playing around with is, sometimes the best thing you can do as a leader is learning when to follow and knowing when you need to step back. Really, especially now in the time that we're in, where people are having to, as I've read, in your chapter, reevaluate how they hook people in. And if we're trying to hook people in with the same bait, as we say in New Orleans, baby, like that is spoiled. That's gone rotten. It's not good enough. That's not enough now, especially when we've learned we have way more priorities now. There are more things that we put on the back burner in a world where we just moved so fast, and people realize how precious time is. I'm not going to waste my time with this thing that you think is above me. I'm going to go someplace where I feel valued. Who is it? Was it Colton Blake who said, students do not return to places where they do not feel love. And if you're the thing that you are offering me comes with a chain or a leash, I don't want it. They don't want it and they won't take it. So we have to know that we have to not just only let them take the lead in how we approach getting them into our ensembles and approach our communication, and that how we greet them, how often we see them, that our intentions in communication are not just for recruitment purposes or to check a box for what we do, but because I don't know, here's a fun fact, perhaps you just want to get to know a person. What a thought. What if we actually just what a thought. What if I asked you how you were doing? I start all my classes like this. Turn to your neighbor and ask them how they're doing. Or say good afternoon. And then they do all that. And I said, now turn to someone else and ask how they're doing and listen for a response. And then reply with, thank you for sharing. We have to practice active listening. I have to get out of the way. I can't keep talking. It can't just be a gimmick. I have to actually give them the time to practice that. And then, wait for it. Then I got to throw myself in there and practice myself. I got to practice using my elbow. I got to practice doing it with my mask on or whatever the circumstances in, depending on where you are. But no one in the room can skip the practice room. Everybody has things that they need to apply. Did I do it? Did I say it? Did I say the thing?
Oh, that was so good.
You did. Okay. And, you alluded to it. To the next question. I mean, we've talked about already the importance of, the qualities of an effective leader as a choral leader and what we as choir directors, the types of characteristics that we need to embody. What's the next step? How do we take that learning that we've done within ourselves and for ourselves and teach that to the people that we serve, our singers, our volunteers, our board members, our parents, our community? How do we take that next step and get them to buy in to that same vision for ourselves?
That's a tough one. Things like this are hard because I go back to how I was raised. I mean, I grew up, and my formative years were in Austin, right? I did middle school and high school in Austin. But when I was 12 and under, I was in New Orleans. And so this question has made me think of being elementary Coty in the foyer of the church I went to. I went to First Evangelist Missionary Baptist Church. You have to say all the words. And Bible study would happen on, let's say, a Wednesday night. And grandma will be in Bible study and I can hear everything that's happening. And I'm doing science homework in the front. And I remember the deacon, who is now the reverend, who's still the reverend at that church, coming out and talking to me and gently inviting me into Bible study. And I'm like, well, all the adults are in there. I don't need to be in there. And I have homework and this has to get done. And here's someone who came to me, who stopped what they were doing and came to me and said, but you're missing this space. And I would love to share this story with you. And I would love to see what you're doing with your science homework. I hear you're smart. And, he's just telling me all these things and being very genuine with how he is approaching me. And I rolled my eyes and I was like, okay. And as someone who is thinking about the intersection of faith and religion and music now, as an adult in music education, that was not my mindset as a child. But I sat out there because I felt very removed from what was happening in the other room. So the key to bringing everyone on board is not just the invitation in the space, but letting them know that there is something for them in that space. The part of me that loves science saw science and miracles. Very much so. I saw science and miracles as interchangeable. That was my hook in. When we invite community members, parents, kids, and admin, whomever, when we invite them in, why are we inviting them? Because the answer can't just be, well, I'm having a concert and you should just be there. But it feels like that, right? You're sweating your behind off. You're doing all this stuff. You got all the things. You've been advocating for the arts because once again, here we are still advocating for music because there's not enough data, right? That music works. I'm a little sarcastic the older I get. I'm trying to keep good. I'm trying to keep right with Jesus.
You're
but
doing great. You're right on point.
But like, there's clearly not enough. Right? So here we are once again advocating for our art. And that's, again, it hooks me back to what I read, in your first chapter, that we just don't understand why presenting it just isn't enough. Like, why don't you believe that this is enough? Because people do not return to spaces where they don't feel love. And part of love is the invitation. Part of creating a space of love is one in which people feel welcomed. I see myself in your repertoire. I see myself in your concert selections and your themes. You've made such an effort to avoid the nights in which we go to mosque or church or to temple. You've avoided the nights in which we have large community things because you wanted to make sure this was available. Matter of fact, I knew that you did that because I saw you at community events. I saw you at my son's basketball game and my daughter's track game and the cheerleading event and this and that. You attend some of the same things. When I saw you in the grocery store, you ended your conversation on the phone to say hi to me. People want to know that you see them. And the reason why I genuinely believe that is true is because you can take away choir and replace it with anything else. And the statement will still ring true. Is that people you can be the best doctor in the hospital, but if you aren't willing to sit with me for the bad news and celebrate the cure, then I don't think you actually care about me. And if you don't care about me, you'll let anything happen to me. Same thing in the arts.
Life way to put it.
Yeah.
You've given us like step by step. Not only do you need to be intentional and give a clear space with a why as to why these people need to be in, you're still practicing great human practices with your whole community. And so it's evident how what you are cultivating in your choir room, in your classroom, that is also translating to the community at large, and you're present and visible. I think that's so huge. And it leads perfectly to this next question. What does an inclusive recruitment strategy or retention plan look like as we talk about intentionality? How do we need to go about this to be more inclusive and still get the people that we need in our spaces?
I believe the first step to that is asking yourself, why are we recruiting? What is our goal? Is our goal just to expand the numbers? We just want to grow the program? That's not a bad goal. But it is a surface level step, because you can have plants grow in the yard, but some of them might be weeds. So in order to be an effective gardener, you have to be intentional about what you plant, right?
Look at you with all these metaphors. These are so good.
Thank you. I don't know. Maybe I was a little Yoda. Maybe it's the little preacher in me. Who knows? But it's also how I learned. And my students who have been or who are on the spectrum or have different learning abilities, my metaphors don't work for them. So I'll paint like a whole picture of vocabulary, and then they're like, what do you mean?
Hey, you have to practice for those people too. I mean, intentionality.
Boom, that part. I'm just going to circle back to that real quick. And then what happens is that I get frustrated and I say, I don't understand why you don't understand what I'm saying. But I have created a phrase that apparently only works for a certain group of people. And someone has just clearly made it known that it just doesn't work. So then it falls back on me. Can I say it without all the colors and the rainbows? And if I can't, it's my fault. It's not that kid's fault. But I digress. What are we talking about? Remind me.
Recruitment and retention. I'm like so obsessed with all your metaphors. I'm the one who got us sidetracked. That was beautiful.
Oh, it's okay.
I'm like thinking about all these trees and the different types of things growing. So we're talking about what are some of the strategies, or what does an inclusive recruitment and retention plan look like? What are things we can do?
Yes. So I would say have the conversation with your ensemble. What are you looking for? Right now, the last component of my job title here at Portland State is in social justice. And the conversation that we had about this position was, we really want to recruit, for lack of a better word. We want to invite people in the houseless community to sing so that we can get them resources. And I was asked, Coty, is that something that you're passionate about? I'm like, of course I'm passionate about it. I just don't know if that's the right angle. And it's because houselessness doesn't just start with what we may see downtown or underneath a major highway. Houselessness begins with young people who are couch surfing, living in cars or in what we refer to as unstable home environments. The key is not to just be defensive, but to be preventative. So if I go back to a public school setting, an academic setting, you got to ask, what are we planting? Because if you only plant one type of plant, that's all you're going to get. And that's a lot to bank on. If you're only attempting to recruit young men or people who identify as young men, is it because you generally want that gender? That's not what you want. You want tenor bases. Mm-hmm. So articulate that. You're looking for tenor bases. Your students can help you find tenor bases because there are things that you can teach them to hear for in the speaking ranges of their peers, and then they can recruit that. But if you just ask for boys, then what are you saying about what's present in the room? If you just ask for girls, what are you saying? Recruitment should be out of expanding the family or to resolve a problem. That's what you need to make clear, is what are the problems you're trying to resolve, and what beautiful things can come out of expanding this family, out of expanding this garden. There are great resources available for, recruitment and, being in the cafeteria, singing songs, hanging up posters, utilizing social media, Instagram, TikToks. Facebook groups aren't really the thing of this generation of Gen Z. Quick ads, graphics, announcements, those are all wonderful ways to reach people. But if you don't know why you're doing it, if you don't know what the end game is, I had a year where we went on a massive recruitment tour when I was teaching at North Shore Senior High. And the beautiful thing about that year is that the kids were the best recruitment. That's why I gotta say that. That graduating class of 2015 came to destroy. They came with the viciousness. We took 8 choirs to festival in Houston, Texas, and all 8 came back with superior ratings in all categories. So we felt awesome. That was a situation where the kids really did speak for themselves, and they loved their pop show. It was Disney themed. It was super cute. We're looking at all these little mice across the room with their little ears. It was adorable, right? So I come back to
invested. They were invested.
They were invested. We had built a genuine culture of community that sang. Yes, it's a culture of singing because they could say, but this community is untouchable. Well, dang it. I was like, let's build. So the next fall, that next semester, they came back to school and I had over 90 tenor basses in a non-varsity tenor bass class, 92 to be exact. I still remember the picture that was taken that day. And everybody was just so excited that I had 92 tenor basses in that class. And I was freaking out because I knew at least 20 of them didn't actually want to sing for me. Mm-hmm. That's what I find in recruitment. Sometimes people would fall in love with me, which is a beautiful thing. But I need you to also build a relationship with music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's you tapped on so many things there.
We went on a little loopy loop.
No, but Alex, help me get all those pieces. The intentionality.
Yeah, it was intentionality. Asking yourself what are you recruiting for? Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
Empowering the students to be a part of it. Like even in the first conversation, you said, start with your students and ask what they want.
Yeah.
What do they need? And that recruitment is twofold. You've already addressed retention without ever saying the second R word. If they know that they're a valuable part of the decision-making process, they're not going anywhere.
And that's less work for me.
It's a win-win.
I could use a break. And here's a beautiful thing about involving students in recruitment, in repertoire selection, in expectations for the classroom, is that when they're involved and then you disagree, because it's going to happen, you have also established a rapport of how you handle the question, why? So I meet the child where they are. Let's talk repertoire. I meet them where they are. The school year begins. I've picked selections and I will use the previous school year in COVID. The way they sang revealed to me that this rep was not going to work. I can show up to school all day and try to beat these notes into them and hate everything. Or I don't know, I could just cut the rep and ask them, what are you listening to on the radio now? What's going on? Now, some people take that idea and they go far. And we're singing pop songs in the fall. I know a lot of teachers who have their first concert be 2 to 3 weeks into the school year. I'm going to show you off the handbook to the parents. Everybody sings 1 or 2 songs. They're mostly pop songs, show choir tunes, and we have a good time. That's a great idea. And if I was teaching public school right now, I would totally do that, right? That's my plan as I'm doing outreach at school here in Portland, that we would do the same thing. But it's not necessarily that it has to be pop music. The whole point is, what are they listening to and what makes them want to make music? So as you move further along and you say, hi, as a member of this community, I'm really interested in doing this piece. And I invite you to try this one out. Let's try it out. They will step forward. They will step forward into it. That's another great way to practice. When you encounter a piece, you're deep into it and you realize maybe there's something that is just not politically correct for the time they were in. You sing it when you're in college, you love it. You sing in high school, it was great. And now in this generation, we realize there's something up with that phrase there that just doesn't speak to them anymore. You can no longer say, well, back in my day, well, darling, that was your day. And I'm glad you had your day. But in today, where the kids are in front of you, where the young people are in front of you telling you that that doesn't speak to them, you can have a conversation to reveal what that text means. Perhaps it's a miscommunication, because that's what practice is. Practice does not mean that cancel culture is the next response. Amen. Practice means that we're going to have a conversation to decide if that's the direction we need to go, or if we need to, or if we're going to expand our knowledge about it. And that's what we just needed, is a vocab check, is a phrasing check.
You've given us so much advice. You've given us advice for how to be leaders, for how to empower both the people in our rehearsal spaces and in our communities at large. Mm-hmm. This has been such a fabulous conversation. I want to leave the listener with, like, what is the one thing you want them to walk away with from? In addition to practice and empower and know why and be intentional. Like, I got all the pieces. But, like, what's the nugget you want them to walk away from this with?
Not an original Coty quote. I've just been using it within the realm of education. There are no such things as advanced skills. There are only more fundamental skills for advanced situations. We are all in a time period of fundamental skills. Everything we're doing is making us go back to the box of ingredients. You thought you knew how to bake a cake, and something's not working out right. Our oven might be too hot. The temperature of our peers, of how we interact, we run super hot. We get offended really fast. We get awkward in situations we used to not get awkward in. We don't know how to greet each other. Go back to fundamental skills. You thought you were stressed out about teaching a quarter note and an eighth note. I'm telling you to practice the greetings at the door. You think they don't know how to count triplets and how to find a fourth from do to fa. And I am telling you that we need to practice saying people's names correctly. Go back to fundamental skills, because everything else will line up just accordingly. And until we decide that that's what we need to do, we're like a kid trying to pretend they cleaned their room by throwing things in the closet and stuffing it under the bed and hiding it under the rug. It's never actually clean. It's never actually working. We're just pretending like it's working and raising anxiety. What if you just started over, do the laundry, clean out the closet, and you might find there are things that you had hanging in the closet and underneath the rug, underneath the bed that you were holding on to that you don't need anymore. At one point in time, you needed to use that to teach. You really did. You needed to have that much control in the space, but now you don't, because you're smarter. Believe me when I say you are smarter. You have to be your own cheerleader in this and believe that you too have grown, and you've grown in a direction not just of more advanced skills, but of the fundamental ability to let go, and let other people be part of the learning experience.
That's the subtitle of this whole section.
Listen to talk about this stuff all night. Do you want to write the chapter?
Oh, no, I'm good. I'm writing all this stuff.
This has been so fun. Thank you so much for doing this, Coty. It was lovely.
It was lovely. Thank you for having me.
Gosh, wasn't that like just the best conversation with Coty? She is such an inspirational leader. What she is doing within her community, both at Portland State and with her organization, there's just so many wonderful things that we can learn from her and behaviors that we as choral directors can emulate, not just for our choirs, but questions we need to ask ourselves about our role as a choral leader and the responsibilities that come with it.
I really enjoyed the energy she brought to this conversation. It really makes me feel excited to go back to the editing table with the chapters in this section. So this is section 2 in the book. If you want to find out more about the book, you can check out details. We are always talking about it at our monthly Patreon meetups, patreon.com/musicedmatters. If you enjoyed this conversation and you liked having a co-host, I'd love to hear all about it. Rate and review us. But as we always say at the end, you know what? You really matter. What's the next line? We all know that.
Music matters.
Especially how to find and empower your people. And we'll see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast.